So next, we have a presentation on effects of pair housing on dairy calf welfare and performance, a systematic review by Dr. Katarína Bučková. She is a postdoc research associate at Iowa State University. She is especially interested in farm animal welfare and animal affected state and effects of enrichment on animal development. So Dr. Katarína Bučková, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for introducing me and my talk. I hope you can see everything okay. If not, so just let me know, please. I would like to just add that this work was done in collaboration with my former colleagues from Czech Republic. And let's talk about dairy cows.
Excuse me, please make the PowerPoint in the presentation mode.
Well, I can see it like this on my screen, so maybe I will just share again. Now, is it better?
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so let's just talk about dairy calves. I just cannot move my slides. Okay, so you may be wondering why we decided to write a systematic review on pair housing of dairy cows. So most dairy cows are separated from mothers very shortly after birth, and then they are housed individually for approximately 2 months of their age. However, recently there has been an increased interest of dairy producers in alternative housing systems, such as group or pair housing. Therefore, more than ever, it is important to provide dairy producers and veterinarians, but also policymakers with reliable scientific knowledge on these alternative housing systems. Although pair housing could be the first step in this transition, and there has been quite intense research, there was no review specifically concerning pair housing. So we aim to summarize and critically evaluate the effects of pair housing on dairy calf productivity and welfare. We follow the standard procedures for writing a systematic review, which you can see here. It is very simplified, just to fit it in 12 minutes. It's just important to emphasize that we were only interested in papers where the control individual housing was included. And at the end, we ended up with 35 articles meeting our criteria. So now let's have a look at our conclusions and findings. So first of all, let's discuss calf growth. So here we found that majority of research didn't report any significant differences between pair and individually housed cows, as you can see in the middle column. There were a few studies which actually reported improved body weight in pair housed cows, and only one study which reported that pair housed cows actually grew slower. It's important to say that if there was positive effect of pair housing, these cows were always fed optimal amounts of milk, because this is another issue in dairy industry, that dairy cows sometimes aren't fed sufficient amounts of milk. So now let's talk about feed intake, which is closely associated with growth. So here we found similar trend before and during weaning. So we found that majority of papers didn't report any significant differences between pair housed and individually housed cows in feed intake. And again, there were few studies which reported that pair housed cows consumed more feed. This slightly changed after weaning because here we can see that majority of research reported that per house cows consumed more feed. However, as Jessica said, like Jessica said before, so here we really need to think how to interpret this because we only had 7 studies and the difference isn't that big because 3 studies out of 7 didn't find any significant differences. There were also some other variables associated with feeding, but here we only had a very limited number of studies. This means no more than 3 studies per variable. And sometimes it wasn't clear how we should interpret the findings. For example, if feeding pattern was different between individually and per house cows, so what does that actually mean relative to dairy calf welfare or a dairy producer? However, our conclusions on health are very clear. Here, we really found that majority of research didn't report any significant differences in any health parameter assessed between per house and individually housed cows. This is a very important finding because now we can confidently say that pair housing doesn't impair calf health. Unfortunately, some dairy producers still think or believe that pair housing could impair calf health, and here we can see proof that this is not the case. Now let's have a look at stress. So here we found that majority of papers reported better coping with stress in pair house cows, and this could be explained social buffering effect. However, there were also few studies where pair house cows performed worse or there was no significant difference. Now let's discuss behavior. So we had 3 categories: activity, social behaviors, and abnormal and stereotypical behaviors. Social behaviors are quite self-explanatory, and here we found that majority of research reported better developed social behaviors in pair house cows. This could be simply because they had an opportunity to interact with conspecific early in their life, while individually housed cows didn't. So later in life, when they were introduced to groups, after weaning from milk, individually housed cows probably didn't know exactly how to behave when meeting a conspecific. Activity was a little bit tricky. Here we included walking, standing, lying down, and use of space. And of course, there were interpretation issues. So if, for example, walking was more frequent in pair house cows, what does that actually mean? Is it good or bad for their welfare, or how should we interpret this finding to the producer? But majority of studies, you can see in activity line that majority of studies didn't report any significant differences in activity anyway. So you may be wondering what was included in abnormal or stereotypical behavior. So there were mostly behaviors associated with oral manipulation, for example, style grooming or manipulating parts of pen. And here, again, it seems that abnormal or stereotypical behaviors were less frequent in pair house cows, but again, we don't have enough studies and the difference doesn't seem to be that big, at least not yet. Now let's discuss emotional states and learning abilities. Here we really had only limited number of studies, so we definitely need more research on this topic. First of all, emotional states. So we found that pair house cows were more optimistic in a cognitive bias test, which I performed during my PhD study, which is a certainly indicator of improved emotional state in pair house cows, but the results of other 3 studies on emotional states in pair housed versus individually housed cows are mixed. So they are not quite consistent with what we have found in 2019. It's worth noting that all these 3 studies are on play, and there can be many factors why the results are mixed. For example, type of bedding used or pen size and so on. And also we see that there were only 3 studies, and so in total we only had 4 studies. And another interpretation or reason could be that play doesn't have to be necessarily a good indicator of emotional states when comparing individually to pair house cows. And this is because there were some studies who actually found that animals sometimes increase play in stressful situations, including social isolation. Now let's discuss learning abilities. So here there were only 3 studies, and in one of them there were 2 cognitive tests used. And we found that only in one study there was some difference. So pair house cows perform much better in a reversal task, which makes us to think that maybe positive effect of pair housing is only present when the task is very challenging. But it is more scientific opinion, because again, we don't have many studies here. So your take-home message is that pair housing improves social behavior and coping with stress. So this is quite clear. But there are no other consistent differences because we only have had a limited number of studies, or the results were mixed. And we can quite confidently say that pair housing doesn't impair calf health and productivity. You may be wondering what the next steps are. So this month we would like to finish the review and submit to Journal of Dairy Science, and then we would like to communicate these findings to dairy producers to facilitate the transition from individual housing to more welfare-friendly housing systems. As I already mentioned, there are still concerns that pair housing may impair cow health, productivity, or both. And actually, these are partially reasons why individual housing is still the most prevailing, although there are also some other reasons. And also we would like to make clear that pair housing isn't the same like group housing, because some advantages of group housing may not apply. And of course, at the end, we hope to see happier cows. And that's all from my side. Thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to discussion.
Thank you for the great presentation. I have one question. Could you outline some challenges encountered in achieving the desired impact of this work, and how was these challenges addressed, please?
Yeah, so like what I think that it is the most significant challenge is that there are still very pronounced cultural things, right? So how animals are housed, so this is also part of culture. And sometimes it's just hard for producers to start doing something else, because they keep saying that we were doing individual housing for, I don't know, several decades, and it was always good. Our cows weren't sick or something, because they simply don't see that there could be something improved, right? Because they have never seen like maybe pair housing or a housing calves with mother or something like that. So for me, like the most challenging is just to overcome their thinking that it could be done by in different way. So like the hardest part is like to start doing something new, like how to explain that this new thing could bring you something new, because it's usually just theory what I can say. So what would be better for them is probably to visit some farm where pair housing is done, and they would see probably heavier cows or something like that. And how it can be overcome just probably having communication with them and saying them that you understand, and then you see that they are becoming more and more open. And I already have experienced that in one farm that they are considering, because pair housing, just because I was doing my research there, and they were I was open to talk to them, right? So I was listening to them. Okay, so you are doing individual housing. Why you are doing individual housing? And they started to be open. They wanted to listen to me. So okay, so if we start doing pair housing, so what we can gain. So just to conclude it briefly, for me, just important to have communication with them and be open to hear their opinions, and then they start seeing your points as well.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Katarína Bučková. Thank you so much.